Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for joining us this morning as well. I have the pleasure of leading our global practice, and we spend all of our time working with our clients and partners and advisory firms on different and alternative approaches doing mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, carve-outs in the cloud. And what you'll see in the conversation later today, and also with our keynote speakers coming up, Michael and Matt, is how they've been able to apply it, not just from the standpoint of integrations, but also separations. So if it's okay, let me give you a quick landscape as to what's going on in the world of transaction services and just level set, and then we can jump right in. So first of all, it has never been a healthier environment for transactions, whether it's an integration, separation, or carve out. The past year has seen historical highs, over 62,000 transactions. That's buyers and sellers matching up to find an asset, and then once again, being an acquirer, or in this case, a separator of that asset. As we take a look at that, obviously historical highs eventually come back down, and we're actually back to our normal 5-year averages going forward, which is still a very healthy number of transactions, anywhere from 40 to 50,000 per year, which is incredible if you think about it. That's almost 1,000 transactions a week of a merger and acquisition being announced and ultimately being consummated through sign and close. So as we take a look at this incredible volume, it really has been interesting because we've seen tremendous turmoil in geopolitical scenarios, global economic uncertainty, and certainly inflation all around the world. One thing is solid and confirmed is that transaction services will still be healthy going forward. As we take a look at the go-forward model for transaction services, many of the third parties are now saying it's a buyer's market. We're entering in a time where there's a lot of assets that are out there, and those assets have depreciated valuations, and they're even stranded for a certain point. So it will be an opportunity for the big to get bigger, and more importantly, some of you will be acquired and others will be acquirers. And I think it's a great opportunity to be prepared for a transaction. And a key theme here, to acquire an asset, you obviously have to have some type of asset to acquire. Therefore, divestitures come into play very closely. One interesting pattern we're also seeing around the world, a lot of transactions have occurred over the past couple of years. And those transactions have actually been bolted on. They actually haven't been integrated. They've been acquired and held at arm's length. So we're seeing a lot of effort right now, what we call post-closure cleanup. And that really happens to be taking all those assets and, more importantly, integrating them into the company and monetizing that more effectively. So with all this good momentum and certainly a little bit of headwind, we're actually still seeing a very consistent pattern. The success rate for these transactions, an integration or separation, is still sitting in the 20 to 30% range, which is very surprising because over time, from a Kaizen approach, you typically would expect improved performance over time. We haven't seen that. It's still sitting at 20 to 30% success rates, synergy growth, synergy savings. And the question should be, why is that happening? Let's talk about a couple of the challenges we're seeing with clients today. And we've been very fortunate with having hundreds of clients using the Zscaler platform for integration, separation services. And each one of them happens to come back with some great data points as to, in the past, what was impeding their success. And we look at it and synthesize, it always comes down to 4 key themes. Number one is time to value. How quickly can you actually take the announcement and then reach sign to close and then achieve day one so that it's auditable? More often than not, we're seeing these transactions taking 12, 15, 18 months to complete, whether it's an integration or a complex divestiture with the TSA sitting behind it. So time to value has been impedance to the success of these transactions. Number 2 is risk. I think one of the greatest fallacies is when you acquire an asset, you're assuming it's a healthy environment. We're noticing right now a lot of the assets are being acquired. All of the risk is assumed by the CIO and the CISO. And after that has been announced and post-closure due diligence has been done, we're finding out these assets are not only concerning, but also, more importantly, potentially compromised, impacting the valuation of that asset once again. The third is value capture. At the end of a transaction, there are 2 metrics that matter: synergy growth, how much incremental revenue have you achieved, and then synergy savings, how much overlapping cost or inefficiencies have you taken out of the acquisition. That is one of the toughest things to do. And more importantly, more often than not, when the transaction starts, usually it's a different group finishing it many years later, and ultimately those synergy savings never are achieved. One more reason why we see the success rate being so low. The last one, which is a subtlety, but it's actually having a derivative effect downstream, mergers and acquisitions and divestitures, there's a common methodology. However, since many companies do this on a very rare occasion, they have to pull their best and brightest away from their digital transformation initiatives focused on cloud native migrations, application workload migrations, AI, ML, automation, and pull those best and brightest architects and engineers back to something as mundane as an actual integration or separation. Separately, we're also noticing the IMOs and SMOs are still using, and once again, these are integration management offices, separation management offices, are using playbooks from 20 years ago and using a methodology called lift and shift. For all intents and purposes, taking something that you acquired and then forcing it into an existing environment. It doesn't lead to a high degree of success, and more importantly, creates incredible cost and complexity. So a couple of themes as we've seen as the outcomes from these challenges. Number one, we talked about time to value. Most importantly, time to value is, can you bring the most important users that you just acquired into your environment as quickly as possible? And unfortunately, that's typically the last thing most companies do during an acquisition. Second of all, when they do acquire an asset and they do 6 months of post-closure due diligence, they realize it's compromised. You spend the next year then remediating with unprecedented cost and expense and complexity associated with it. And the last one we're noticing is just the whole bolt-on acquisition piece. Many of these acquisitions, once again, it's very easy to say a provided connectivity to the acquisition. The users have select application access, and the security policies, well, ships in the night. And that really doesn't work. So the outcomes just aren't matching what, more importantly, what the plan happens to be. So if that was the case, and these are the top challenges, what can be done to solve them? So a couple of themes we like to bring back when you think about doing a transaction in the cloud is, as Pam mentioned earlier this morning, we like to make this very simple. And once again, whether you're an existing Zscaler client or you're not a Zscaler client, what we're trying to do is help provide integrations without integrating the two estates. And from there, you get the speed, the velocity, the security, and the simplification that you never expect early on in the first 90 days. So let's take a look at what we do. So the first thing that we like to do in this diagram on the right-hand side, if you parse that, you notice the little blue cloud in the middle, which happens to be a Zscaler cloud. And for that little rectangular shape, consider that to be a connector between the existing environment, which is on the left-hand side, which we'll call Ingest, who's going to be the acquiring company. And on the right-hand side, we happen to have SpinCo, which is going to be the asset that's being acquired. So let's just make an assumption on the left-hand side that it's an existing client and they have today's Zscaler deployed. You have an ability to connect your users to your application through a zero trust exchange, leveraging your policies and controls through a common identity and access management system. You have full access to your internal applications, your external applications, and a common security policy, whether your employees are working from home, on the road, or in the office. It doesn't matter to us. We're connecting users to applications with a common and consistent policy. So life is good. You have all the necessary controls, reporting, monitoring, and telemetry to realize you've got a very healthy and secure environment with performance also tied to it. You acquire an asset. And unfortunately, ITS, when an asset is announced, usually our folks in IT, having been there, are the last ones to find out. So you're scrambling, trying to figure out what exactly happened. And then more importantly, what are you going to do next? What we like to do is really a 90-day plan. And how do we help get you connected with the acquired users or acquired entity as quickly as possible? So we have 5 simple steps we work on for the rapid acquisition in a secure manner. Number one, once you've been able to reach sign and close, we then work with you and you work with the acquisition target to deploy a small little client connector on their endpoints. We now have an ability to connect those users into that zero trust exchange. Key theme, connecting them into the exchange, not into your environment, over any medium you'd like to use today, over the public internet preferred or through an SDN connection. Number 2, we'll connect their applications into your tenant as well. Third, we'll connect their identity and access management system. So just like they're working today, they have applications that are in the cloud, they're sitting in a co-location or their data center, they're now connected in the Zero Trust Exchange. The users, as I mentioned before, can be in a branch, a campus, working from home, work from anywhere. They're now connected to the exchange. We have a common identity and access management system that they've integrated in. So life is working, so users connect to applications with the proper AAA services. Now, this is where the fun begins. Since this is all software as a service, we're just turning on capabilities. One of the very first capabilities we like to recommend, because we have an ability to connect users to applications from Splitco, is to profile the environment. Who are those users? What are their applications? What are their security policies? What are the risks, threats, vulnerabilities? Not 6 months later, not 9 months later, but actually in near real time, you can start to get a full perspective as to what those assets, risks, threats, vulnerabilities, users, and applications happen to be. Step number one. Step number two, once you understand that type of information, you can decide what type of policy and the type of security to enforce it, which is what is just turned on as a capability in the cloud, whether it's firewall, application firewall, IDP, traffic profiling, anomaly detector, SSLT, data loss prevention, all key themes during an acquisition for something that you don't know, but you now have choice and flexibility. So you've identified users, identified applications, you've confirmed their access management control is effective, you have a profile, and now you can allow them in. And we allow them in, it's very interesting, from right to left. Do they really need access to all 1,000 applications in your environment? Most likely not. Following zero trust best practices, the theme happens to be least privileges. So you turn on capabilities only that they need. ERP, CRM, human capital management, a welcome portal, and suddenly you have an acquisition that might have taken 2 years to integrate when you try to stitch together two completely disparate environments. You're now up and running, not in years, not in quarters, not in months, but in weeks, days, and you hear it later on, even in hours. So now you actually have an environment that's fully connected. Users connect applications from Splitco into, in this case, ingest, both internal applications, internet applications, and you also have a common security policy along the way. You provide least privileges and once again, provide entitlements only as needed for the acquisition. You've now done this in record time, and you're now starting to show synergy growth because the sales organization is referencing a common CRM system. The CFO you just had acquired and joined your organization is now referencing the same ERP system. We have performance monitoring, so you know when someone comes on board in the acquisition, they're having a good day or they're having a performance impedance day. And you proactively reach out to them, letting them know, hey, we care about you because the talent that we acquired is as important as the data. So that's the integration methodology, 5 very simple steps to get them up, running, connected. And then you can begin the heavy lifting, because once you finish that phase, you've met day one change of control for audit, and you can then begin the work on rationalization of legacy technology of those applications and figure out what portion of that estate should be remaining, what portion of that estate should be moving to the cloud, and what of that workload should be carried over for data integration for synthesis. Let me just synthesize everything I just said in a simple slide. We talked about a lot. When we think about how M&A has been done in the past, it's a 1, 2, 3-year journey. When we do happen to have those journeys, we're forcing 2 disparate environments to work together, and in a separation or divestiture, it's very similar. When we do force that, it takes incredible amount of time, effort, cost, most importantly, risk, affecting not just the asset that you're acquiring, but also your own home state as well. When you do that physically using a playbook from 20 years ago, you're using a lift and shift methodology, which has been outdated. If you think about it, the best correlation is that your most important workloads today are now sitting in a cloud. Your most important business process, which is mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, is also now migrating to the cloud. When you do that, you see profound benefits, not just from a standpoint of time to value, measured once in years, it's now down to days. You're noticing risk mitigation being extensive because you're assuming that an asset that you're acquiring is fully compromised, and because of it, you can start to remediate immediately as part of the integration strategy. Your significant cost reduction, you're no longer waiting 9 months just for assets to arrive because of silicon shortages or elongated deployments of telco circuits. It's all software as a service. And then lastly, most importantly, it's an operational simplification play. You're not mobilizing architects, engineers, operations from infrastructure, networking, and security. It really becomes a cloud-like deployment with a full stack engineer and an SRE. This has been utilized from a methodology standpoint for more than 350 clients around the world, many of them Fortune 100. And we're very excited about the success they've had, and more importantly, those that continue to use it on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, quarterly basis as serial acquirers or serial investors. So appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over to Michael and Matt next to talk more about a customer example.